Now we go to the next question on foreign policy. It will come from Jim Ragsdale and Mr. Walz first. I don't need to tell you that the war in Iraq is 5.5 years old, which is longer than U.S. involvement in World War II. U.S. deaths are at about 4,200. But since the surge began in early 2007, monthly deaths, combat deaths, civilian deaths, sectarian violence have significantly declined. I guess my question is if we can look forward instead of looking backward, which we've been doing for most of the last couple of years. What lessons have we learned from our experience in Iraq, and specifically what's sometimes called the Bush doctrine of preventive war, or being quote on offense? Has that been proven to be the proper strategy when confronting essentially stateless terrorism? Thank you, Mr. Walz.
That Bush doctrine's not a trick question, right? What went wrong in Iraq? What went wrong in Iraq is when we let ideology drive foreign policy. When we let a few people, whether it was Donald Rumsfeld or others, decide which direction we were going to go. When we had an ideology that said this is our time and we have a unitary executive who doesn't need Congress's approval, we don't need to make sure the facts are there, and we rush ourselves into war. I think we need to be very, very clear that the policy going in was refuted by so many experts, and the issue of how many troops needed to be on the ground, General Shinseki, Eric Shinseki, who when I was in the military I served under as the commander of the Army, General Shinseki said, all history shows us we need about 1 soldier for every 50 members of the population, for 50 people in the country. And he said we need 500,000 people, and this thing will cost hundreds of billions of dollars, and could last years. The administration fired General Shinseki, and they put someone in who agreed with them. And then we had Vice President Cheney say, oh, it'll be weeks, not months. What we've learned from this is trust the experts. What we've learned is that Congress, as the elected official, needs to make the decisions over war. Dr. Davis has made what I think is one of the most hard for me to understand positions ever made. He says the war in Iraq will be decided in the future, and the lessons learned is when the Iraqi people decide that it's over and vote for it to have us come home. And as I've said, the idea of giving our sovereignty over our military and our foreign policy to the very same people who tried to blow us up is exactly the type of rigid ideology that got us into this. Moving forward, the lesson learned here is the people who perpetrated 9/11 are in Afghanistan in the hills of Pakistan. And if we need to make sure we get them, we need to. I was in a meeting with Admiral Mullins briefing people, and he was explaining to members of Congress there really isn't a line on the ground between Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's no border. Listen to the experts. That's what we should have done from the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Walz. Mr. Davis, you have 2 minutes.
I like how you said that we need to look forward instead of looking backward, but we can learn some lessons there. And I'll start off first by saying the perpetrators of 9/11 died on 9/11. Many of them have been captured, many of them are in prison, and we are safer now than we were on September 12th. In October of 2002, the Congress of the United States voted to give the President authorization. They voted on 22 reasons. It wasn't just one reason. And of course there have been mistakes that have been made. And I would agree General Shinseki was correct. I'd also agree that I'd also put forward that a year and a half ago the administration said, you know, come to think that maybe he was right after all. We need to have a surge. And what happened at that time, there were members of Congress, yourself included, that were strongly against the surge. And this surge has worked. You know, John Murtha said the surge will never work in March of 2007 and in November. He came back and said the surge is working. So it did work. We did learn some hard lessons. We must respect and value the sacrifice of our soldiers, our volunteer force that went over there and made the ultimate sacrifice. With respect to how we move forward, the most important part of this question, we have worked to install a democracy in Afghanistan and Iraq, just like we did after World War II in Germany and Japan. Same goal, different countries, different methods. I think right now what we should have, ask them to have, is a referendum amongst the people in Iraq, and ask the question, should the United States military stay, or should the United States military go? from one democratically elected government to another. All of our NATO allies and in Japan, former adversaries, they have the same choice, from one democratic government to another. Should we leave or should we go? If Japan tomorrow said we want American troops out of Japan, we would leave. Likewise, I think if the Iraqis asked us to leave through a referendum in the parliament, then we should do that in an orderly fashion, with heads held high, that we try to accomplish the goal.
Mr. Davis, Mr. Walz, 1 minute rebuttal.
Well, till the end of my days, I will reject that the sovereign nation of the United States of America should allow the people of Iraq to make decisions on foreign policy. Our military has performed admirably. There's no doubt about that. They always will. The issue here is we have the Bush administration that believed the only power the nation had was military. That the soft power of our economics, the soft power of our moral ideas, the soft power of being able to build alliances. We can't even get our allies in Afghanistan to provide them helicopters. When I was there in January, we have lacks of coverage for wounded soldiers to be evacuated off the field. We have simply had a Wild West attitude, a mentality that said this. I think the analogy of trying to draw Germany and Japan into World War II into the sectarian soup that's fermented in the Middle East is absolutely inaccurate. And I will reject and tell you right now, as long as I'm in Congress, I will fight every single day to make sure we're not in Iraq 60 years. So,
Thank you, Congressman Walz. Mr. Davis?
Well, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're stating that you would reject the idea of a referendum, and that if the Iraqi people told us they wanted us to leave, that we wouldn't leave because we're a sovereign nation if our troops are there.
we already did that. Maliki asked us to leave and we stayed.
They talked about a timetable, they haven't said we leave tomorrow. But if you agree with that, then we don't disagree. But if you disagree with that, then if the Iraqi people, if the referendum asked us to leave and we didn't leave, then there's a big problem, because that would be very arrogant for us not to leave if they asked us to leave through a democratic process.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. We are on to the next question.